because it's easy for a woman to find herself being lost in a marriage, especially like coming from an Indian society where you're expected to become part of the family and not be an individual identity.
There are no wrong choices. And then it's like, okay, but how do I make this like very material decision when I know that none of it really matters?
And I told my mom, do not mention marriage to me, at least I'm 26, because I wanted to be independent.
And so to me, it was like, okay, like I know heartfulness and this like meditation practice is like fundamental to like my future and how I want to grow and learn. So anyone who wants to be a part of my life long-term needs to be okay with that.
Fast forward to college, these hormones, and I just like really want a boyfriend. And like anytime I would meet a guy or like some guy was interested in me, they were so predictable and boring.
And the idea that I have to like play it cool and then like see if they're committed and then like hold back the I love you until like that idea, which I see often with my friends and like in general with modern dating, like really like doesn't make sense to the way I operate.
Not only should you be doing something really meaningful, but then you should be seen doing something really meaningful. And especially with social media culture.
Oh, we have so many opposites. He's a dark chocolate, I'm a white chocolate person. But thankfully, we don't have to share chocolates.
So it's like, I only did that for her. So that she would like...
Excuse me?
Woof woof. Welcome to KANHACAST. In this episode, Emma Ivaturi is speaking to Kashish Kalwani and Suraj Sehgal. Kashish and Suraj have been married since 2021 and are living in the United States. Kashish has a master's in development practices from Emory University, and Suraj is doing an MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, Haas School of Business. Both of them are heartfulness trainers.
Kana is a very special place for you for various reasons, but you guys were also engaged and married here.
Yeah.
So how long ago did you meet here?
I would say almost 4 years ago. But the first time we met each other was 2018 August. It was an international youth seminar here. I was volunteering with the social media team, and someone reached out to me and said, you have to interview these 10 people about like how are they meditating, what is their practice about, and would just inspire other youth to like practice and try heartfulness. And one of the persons I interviewed was Suraj. And I was really blown away by his answers, and I was just curious to know more about him. So,
do you remember anything he said?
I remember asking him a question about cleaning. And he mentioned that he's studying international affairs and psychology, and that's what made me want to know more about him. That's it.
Did you remember the interview?
I also remember that I was asked about cleaning, and I don't remember anything else. But I remember she took down my number, and I was at that time very oblivious. It just like completely went over my head that it didn't register as anything. And then like we talked a little bit as well after for like a couple months, and then lost contact, and then we're reintroduced to each other as like, hey, like you both are interested in like getting married, like. And at that point she was just like, I know this guy, like I've read his blog. I was like, she had commented. I looked back and I was like, yeah, I was like, this person has actually read through all my blogs and like my Instagram posts and like knows about things that I think about and like cares about that.
Yeah. I think I liked him as a person, not necessarily like attracted to him, but I just knew that we could be great friends. And so I just wanted to keep in touch, but then we lost touch for a year.
So it was a pretty soft landing. Connecting and getting married.
But I think I was just glad to like have him as a friend in my contact list, basically. Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is that, we grew up in the West. You grew up here in India. And those of us without Indian parents, the idea of an arranged marriage is a little intense or foreign or strange or alarming. Yeah. And I know I'm not always forthright about it with people I don't know very well. But I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience with meeting someone and under that circumstance and how you would context it and how you experience it and what you feel are the benefits of it.
I could go on for yeah.
Take lead.
Yeah, no, this is a big one because like I was born and brought up in the US in Atlanta, and so like for me And I grew up with just my parents and an only child. So it's like I sort of had this, I joke with my parents that I grew up watching like Disney movies, which are all about like breaking off from your parents and doing your own thing and being away from their expectations, and like, and then you go off and do your own thing with your own family, and like you win the dog competition or whatever, and etc. And like the finally your family like comes and accepts you, and this like sort of very like independent, freedom oriented nature. And this idea, like I never would have imagined back in like 2018 when I had gotten my job offer and I started my job in 2019, I never would have imagined that like 2 years later that I would have stayed with my parents for a full year and a half because of COVID, that I would have gotten engaged with somebody and then agreed that to like live with my parents and her together and envision a life in which like we would all live together with my parents as grandparents and her parents as grandparents, like in the same house at some point. Like that I couldn't have never have said that, like I would have had that like thought process, but like I've come a long way. I think, but yeah, I think like to go back to like the arranged portion for me personally, yeah, like that was never something I thought I would do. Like I never thought, oh, I'm going to do arranged or not arranged. Like I sort of was just kind of open to see what happened. But I think one thing about like modern dating life that like really frustrated me as a person that like, I think through meditation, and I became an instructor when I was in college, like I was just really clear about a lot of things. Like for me, it's really important to just know the things that are most important to you and be like very clear about them, and then be open to the rest. And so to me, it was like, okay, like I know heartfulness and this like meditation practice is like fundamental to like my future and how I want to grow and learn. So anyone who wants to be a part of my life long-term needs to be okay with that. And like that, it doesn't matter whether or not they've been practicing for a while or they're new to it. Like that's just, they need to be okay with me doing sittings and doing sessions and going to group meditations on the weekends and coming to India to this meditation center like multiple times in a year if possible. And I think like the idea of like, I think I meet people in general and like can tell pretty quickly whether or not like I want something longer term with them or not. Like, oh, we're going to be really good friends. Or like, oh, you're a really good person, authentic. Like, I want to deepen this relationship. And the idea that I have to like play it cool and then like see if they're committed and then like hold back the I love you until like that idea, which I see often with my friends and like in general with modern dating, like really like doesn't make sense to the way I operate. And so to me, I really like the idea of like, we don't have to say yes and then like never question it, but it's like have two people who come in with the same set of like expectations of like, we're both trying to get married and we're both trying to build a family. Like do we have enough in common to start building something off of?
Kashish, what about you growing up and it was more in context for you? Were you sure that you would be having an arranged marriage, or it was more of a love marriage kind of atmosphere?
Oh, no, not at all.
Oh, yeah.
There have been plenty of love marriages in my family. And I grew up in a joint family. So like 20 members living in the same house. And I've lived a couple of years abroad, in 4 different countries by now. And so I think it was one of those, I was in Denmark when I was 8 or 9. And I once went and told my mom, like, I was in a school that was run by Catholic, like the Catholic Church. And I just told her like, I want to be a Christian. And she got scared, like, we're going back to India. She needs to know about her culture, her values, where she's growing. Next thing I know, we shifted to India. And I loved it. I immediately felt I belonged there because I didn't realize like there are people like me who look like me, who celebrate the same festivals as me. The jokes did not have this barrier of language, and I could just like be trilingual, but also like really like have so much fun. However, there were some points living in joint family that did not sit right with me, especially when it comes to like patriarchy and just seeing my mom toilet in the kitchen because there are so many other sister-in-laws, right? Like there are 10 siblings. And there was like not respect a lot of times. And it's usually like the trauma of your moms that get passed down generations. So I did argue with my parents that I do not want to marry at all, at least till I'm not 25. And I told my mom, do not mention marriage to me. At least I'm 26 because I wanted to be independent, set myself up. And I was just really repulsed by the idea of marriage simply because I didn't see support from husbands in my family. Except, I mean, my dad is definitely a figure that I look up to because he supported mom a lot. And so my mom was not happy with that idea. And then I think I was talking to my dad, like, if you were to find a guy for me, what would it be like? And he's like, definitely not from our culture. He cannot be Sindhi. And I'm like, thank God. Yes. I don't want to marry another Sindhi person. And then slowly when I got into this meditation practice, it just felt very natural that it would be nice if there's someone who also meditates, because then there's just less things to explain and that person would just get it. Fast forward to college, these hormones, and I just like really want a boyfriend. And like anytime I would meet a guy or like some guy was interested in me, they were so predictable and boring. And I was just like, no, I'm sorry. Like, you're more like a brother to me, but I'm not interested at all. And then my roommate went through a pretty bad breakup after 3 years of relationship. And I got very scared, thinking like, never dated, never liked a guy. Like, I've been attracted, but like they never seem more interesting after the first conversation. Nothing too intellectually stimulating. There's no goal in life. What are they looking forward to? And then I just took out my diary and I wrote, like, if you're there, God, like, help me find a romantic partner. I would be grateful. And then 1 month later, I come to Kanha with my family. And I met Daji. And this is me at 21. He looks at me and I was like, well, I'm going back to Delhi tomorrow, so hope to see you soon. And he's like, do you want to get married? It was just, no. But I didn't say no because my mom had trained me not to say no. And then Daji's like, well, there's a nice guy. You don't have to say yes, but if you're interested, I can just introduce you both and then see where it goes from there. And the moment my mom heard, she's overjoyed. She's like pushing me, say yes. And then I'm like, I'll think about it. And Daji's like, no, I won't force you. Come to me when you're ready. And that was it. That was the seed. And for the next 3 months, I was tortured. Like, who was that guy? Like, I need to know who that guy was. And I think in that 3 months of time, I gave up on a lot of these ideas, like what is the perfect age to find a guy? What is the perfect family? Do I really need to know him from before? Like, do looks matter to me? Does attraction matter to me? But what matters to me is that someone who I trust, someone who knows me, and someone who knows my heart is trying to find a guy or suggest a guy for me who knows his heart. And I came back in December for my training to be a meditation instructor. And I reached out to him like, hey, I think I want to meet the guy. And then he's like, okay. And that's how I got introduced to Suraj. And when I saw Suraj, when I realized it was him, I was like, there's nothing so sure I could be. And it was an immediate yes from me. I don't know if I would have said yes for any other guy. But then I said yes, and my parents didn't know this happened. And then Daji's like, do you want to call your parents? I'm like, okay. So I called, and my mom and dad were, of course, overjoyed. My younger sister was super happy. And for the first time, I just felt like I suck at making decisions. I'm always a very confused person. But if I have ever been sure of saying yes to something, it was to this marriage. And I think life has been happier after that, for sure.
It sounded like you both really understood what your deal breakers were or what your set of values were that were very important to have established inside of yourself, that those parameters were met upon finding each other. I found with an arranged marriage with a spiritual component where we both have this foundation and trust in the spiritual purpose of marriage. That is really the most important factor, that it carries you through, because it's the entering into a marriage where you understand that the purpose of it is to grow and to evolve. And that means sometimes it's uncomfortable or difficult or hard.
Of course.
Yeah. And so it's not, I think the Western culture is sometimes when it gets hard, you split, or it's the other person's fault. And I relate to the Disney messages. We could have a whole conversation on that. But that, you know, the Eastern tradition, and, you know, you'll have to explain more about that because I'm coming from the other side, is that like there's a container which you enter, which is indestructible. What you noticed is sometimes the rigidity of that can create a stagnation and stifling. So it's this balance of the beauty of entering it together and allowing it to alchemize for our evolution, and then, you know, the need for it being infused with that mutual spirituality in order to make it work effectively. Yeah. So you both have seen those two sides, and it's really beautiful to see that starting to blossom with over the last 4 years.
I remember like shortly after we like officially got engaged, like it was we were long distance because of COVID for a while, and like we would just have these conversations where she would say something and I would say like, oh, like it reminds me of this poem, and I would like pull up like Gahil Gibran poem from a book I had, and she's like, what are you talking about? And she pulled it up from her desk, and she's just like,
I was just reading this.
That's the one that I like bookmarked. And like, and we would, to me, it was like such a moment of like, I truly believe like we can learn to love anybody, and like that it was like we are deciding based off of, you know, we had really good criterias that set a good foundation and trust in a spiritual practice, and even like, you know, our love for Daji, and it's like, all of that kind of gave us a safe playground to then move forward and say, okay, now we know what our outcome is, this like loving family that's growing and evolving spiritually. And like the rest is us learning what we love about each other and learning to love and fall in love with each other, versus like having the spark that we start with and then like constantly questioning, is the spark there? Is it gone? Should we leave now? Like it felt like, no, like we know where we're going, and now we're just learning, like discovering the journey on the way there.
Tending the embers.
Yeah.
True. I think there's another, like two things that are coming to my mind is a thing about trust. So I believe like when we talk about marriage, it's definitely legally binded. But like if you're getting into a relationship and if there's this commitment, like you are the one, no matter what, we will make it work. And so approaching, at least giving it some time, like, of course, you're going to have differences. You're not going to be same at all. And like, there have been some moments where I totally do not agree with him. And I've moved continents.
Relationships.
I've moved continents, but then like, despite all of that, there are so many other things that I exactly needed in a partner, or pushes me to grow, or like helps me become a better person. And then, which leads me to the concept of like, does it feel like I'm sacrificing? Like I've talked about this with Suraj and quite a lot, because it's easy for a woman to find herself being lost in a marriage, especially like coming from an Indian society where you're expected to become part of the family and not be an individual identity. So this was like something tricky to me, because when you're in the West, a woman's identity is like much more pronounced. Like you're a working woman, you're a successful like mother, and you have to have your own life and hobbies and going out and like maybe living separate from family. What is this joint family concept? And that did not sit entirely right with me, but also I did not entirely want to become a housewife or like a person at home as well. So I'm still trying to find that balance where I'm not completely losing myself here or there, till I met a dear friend of ours, and I was just sharing with him, like, I want to do something on my own, but like, why does it feel like I still have to take care of the family? And then he's like, that's where the West and East conflict comes, right? And it is okay if you want to lose yourself in family. It is okay if you want to find yourself differently, but do what like brings you more joy, or the way you can express yourself. And I just feel happy doing things, whether they work out or not, because then I just, look life as it's in this whole big picture. Like, was I around people who I love, can love? Am I learning every day something new? Am I doing things that bring me joy? then it doesn't matter like if I'm having a very high paying job or not, if I'm traveling or not, if I'm in this place or not. What matters is like people and just joy. And then I'm like, cool, I think that would be a good life then.
I resonate with that. I realized, we grew up in the West, at least, with this idea of, I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Not only should you be doing something really meaningful, but then you should be seen doing something really meaningful. And especially with social media culture, there's that pressure to be like, what does that look like?
And money.
And there's so many factors to that. And then what you're describing, I feel like I resonate with so deeply. It's this idea that the real work is the inner and interpersonal work. And I can be doing that work irrespective of what vocation I have, whatever job or whatever input-output that is. That's on the surface. I mean, not to say it doesn't affect change in the world and it doesn't help inform our sense of identity or it doesn't help align with our interests. There should be some alignment. But at the end of the day, what's really going on?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how you might resonate with that, having gone through different career and educational momentum.
Oh.
And as a single boy child.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
We won't gang up on you.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm really struggling with this one currently. And so I won't, I tend to say things because I think a lot. I tend to say things and it seems like I know an answer. And so I just don't like this is, but where I'm at currently with it is like, I think because I grew up with parents that meditated and taught meditation, like my sense of authenticity was just like very present. Like it's very hard for me to not do something that doesn't feel authentic, for better or for worse. Because I think often with my parents, like that led to situations at home when I was younger where it's like, I'm just not going to do something. Like I'm going to be very stubborn about it. I'm going to like criticize them of like, you're not living up to your values, like whatever. And I think we all go through that as teenagers, but I had this added layer of like, aren't you like supposed to be spiritual and heartful people? Like, like, and so like when I criticized my dad when I was growing up of like, you're doing a tech company that does nothing for the world. Like, and I went full nonprofit. Like everything I did in high school and partially in middle school, but like everything I did in high school was like volunteering with nonprofits, working with nonprofits in the area, like doing a lot of fundraising. And then in college, it was like doing more like nonprofit consulting, doing food insecurity work. And like at some point I realized I was spending so much time like asking people for money that I was like, what if there's a way I can combine both and like actually make money but help the world? And it's like, I think this is a very classic, this is at any point, like most of my friends that I'm talking to are at some point on this like logical journey. I feel like just because I had a good foundation and parents that had, enough money and privilege that like I could start answering those questions for myself earlier and realize like, I'm not going to be happy unless I physically feel like I'm doing something good. And so that's what got me to the nonprofit. And then it was like, I got to some logical conclusion of like, nonprofit stuff is funded solely by philanthropists and like those philanthropists make money. So it's like got into consulting, but like government consulting. So it's like I'm working with government clients. And then I got somewhere along the lines, I was like, like everything is so high level and strategy oriented. I want to be on the ground. So like now I'm going to do my MBA and try to like do something that's like climate and in the startup world. And like, I think the more I grow personally, I faced this a lot with the MBA program because I got into two different programs and I was like interviewing or like attending both and like seeing the welcome weekends at both and like trying to make a decision. And like Kashish would ask me like, she's like, I'm happy to go wherever. And I'd be like, no, that's not, I need you to be like the deciding factor because I like feel so content in myself with the overarching philosophy that like no matter what happens, things will work out. I know myself well enough that I know that like the real challenge is interpersonal, that like wherever I go, I know that I will make the most of it and I will like find a way to grow and that I'm not choosing between like a war-torn country and like a privileged place. I'm choosing between two top 10 MBA programs. And, like,
Life's rough.
One's closer to an airport that's international and one's slightly further away. Like I'm not really going to make a bad choice, but that made it so much harder to like have the spiritual truth so resonant and forefront in my head of like, there are no wrong choices. And then it's like, okay, but how do I make this like very material decision when I know that none of it really matters? And I think the final part I would say is like, to what you said is like, I'm personally like, because of all of this, have been so like so resistant to sharing anything on social media. And Kashish will know, like, my last post was when we got married, which was in 2021. So it's like, I only did that for her so that she would like,
excuse me?
It would be official so that we could
Okay,
share the
cool.
stories. And
Yeah.
it's like, I knew that was important to you. So
Yeah,
I
of course.
downloaded it, I posted about it, and then I deleted it from my phone. Because I know it's important to have in the world that we live in, but I just don't know how to navigate. Like, I don't like the feeling of I'm sharing something and it's like, who am I sharing it for? And why am I sharing it? And then I get in my head and then no one knows anything about what I'm doing.
Well, we met on social media for the first time because I commented on your copper. I was
Oh,
like, you have
yeah.
beautiful copper. How does it
And
stay
then I
clean?
realized it wasn't even my. It was a stock image.
It was still. Oh, really? I thought that was your home.
Oh no, it was a stock image, but like, sorry. But the caption was actually like a part from my blog. I wanted to share it, but I had no image of utensils that didn't look aesthetic. So I just went, on I think it was Shutterstock or someplace. I don't.
That
it's
makes
not-
me
yeah.
feel better because I do have housewife struggles with like keeping the copper clean.
It's a little too much also.
In what capacity?
I mean, sure, if you have the resources to keep that house clean and good, but I think I've realized over the past few months that a functioning kitchen is much better than a decorative one.
Yeah.
Because the more things you have for decoration, the more cleaning it involves and keeping up with it. And I don't think it's not my full-time job to keep cleaning and doing and taking stuff. Like, can I just get food for us that is home cooked, ready in 30 minutes and warm and ready to share with 20 people? That's the deal.
20 people?
That was just once, but yeah.
It's like on a daily basis.
Daily basis, definitely 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would, I would say like I'm a social person.
Okay.
I'm a social person and I love, that was one of the things like when we had a whole Excel sheet when we first met.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
We do, yeah.
You guys are so
I've been
cute.
thinking we should actually like share the template publicly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Drop it in the comment. Drop it in the
Of course.
Yeah, I have a shareable template, but like
We'll do it. Check it out below.
I had just started consulting, and then when we got introduced to each other, and so for me it was like I naturally think in PowerPoint and Excel at that point, like a couple months in, and when we were like, okay, like yes, let's pursue this further, and like let's go on the trajectory to getting married. Like immediately, I was like, okay, like I know the deal personally of like. Every relationship is not perfect. Like every relationship has its like ups and downs and like things that you need to figure out. How can we just get to those points earlier so that we're not finding out 3 years in like, oh, did you not want to have kids? Like I don't want to be asking that question later, right? So it's like, so what I did, and I also knew the dynamics at play of like coming from the US, male, like obviously because we're abroad, like have more money as well. And so it's just like this dynamic of, and I knew that I'm a verbal processor who tends to like naturally will occupy more space if given. And like Kashish was someone who I knew from her blogs was like much more like loved writing and like would write her diaries and have thoughts. And so what I wanted was my inner facilitator came out of like, what's a way for us to be able to share and have our thoughts on the topic without being influenced by each other before we bring it together. So it was an Excel sheet with multiple tabs. So we did one tab at a time, a set of like 20 questions based off of the urgency of those questions. And like tab 1 was what we did for the first month that we knew each other. But like it was, you have a column for feelings, which is like how strongly do you feel about this? One word, like super strong, medium, indifferent.
Yeah.
And then you have a thoughts column, which is like whatever is in your head. It could be at least a paragraph or more if you have. And then we both have that. We think about it separately. We put it together in a Google Sheet. And then we have a collective decision column as required.
My eyes are glazing over a little bit. Because you want to talk a little bit about what that was like.
When he first introduced it to me, I immediately knew he's the right choice because I As a Virgo, I love planning bullet points, lists, Excel sheets, templates.
Do you have a bullet journal? Or?
Of course I do. I've been doing it for the past 4 years now.
You have to post that on Instagram.
Of course. But even like yesterday, my New Year gift to him was a 45-page templates of worksheets of like daily planner, weekly planner. One of the pages is also like annual partner summit where we as a couple reflect on the past year. We were supposed to do it last night, but we both fell asleep. So maybe tonight. Yeah.
Interfering with that process.
Shout out to Centered Life Co. I took the templates from her. But anyway, like when I saw that, and immediately it was so helpful to have both of our thoughts together. And you could immediately see the difference because his answer to the questions he had put out would be like 3-4 lines. And I had gone like full blown out 3 paragraphs. But it was just helpful because then I'm like, this is tangible in front of me. And there are times where like one of the questions was, if you are angry, how can I help you feel more centered? Or what is the best way to help you when you feel emotional? Like tough questions. And sometimes you just forget what the other person needs in that moment. So I find myself going back to that document. I'm like, oh, he likes this friend he wants to talk to. Let me just reach it out to that friend and be like, hey, can you text Suraj?
Have you made edits to the Excel since filling it out?
No.
It's on our list.
On your bullet journal.
Really? Yeah, because he only created 2 sheets, the main questions. I created the next 3 sheets with all the tiny questions like who's going to do groceries every week? Who's going to do the laundry? It's important because then I find myself like doing maybe more work, especially like when one of us is studying. Like last year when I was studying, he did a lot of the household chores. And like this year I've taken on it. And it's not healthy sometimes because then I realize like I'm not having time left or like too tired to do things that I want to do for work or professional wise. So it's just helpful to like revisit the sheet and see like, hey, this is working, this is not. How can we make it more functioning, easier?
I can't wait to interview you again in 20 years and see how your marriage has blossomed and how your work life has evolved because this is such a great foundation.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay.
That's that's an entire lifetime for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. We will be
maybe with some little ones as well.
Oh yeah. But they'll have to be playing with some auntie somewhere else. You can show pictures. That's great.
That'll be lovely.
So how has being one of your criteria was being in this meditation practice, or at least being okay with the meditation practice. So how has that aspect really infused the relationship or informed the relationship?
It is the most important part. I don't know how we would be functioning if we were not thinking about love or just being centered before entering any conversation, any place, meeting any new person. Definitely provides. Personally, for me, it's just such a point of reflection for me. It gives me a lot of clarity too as to what I want in life. And I feel blessed that I don't feel as confused about my big life decisions. I know like 50 years down the line what to do, even though I don't know tomorrow what's going to happen. But it's just nice to like come back to some grounding principles, some anchoring moments from the day where I can just sit, debrief, like snuggle in my blanket and like be gone and like settle like, it's kind of like, facing my inbox of emails. I love an empty inbox. And there are plenty of emails that come. So it's like, oh, this email can be put in this folder, this email in this folder. And by the end, like I've checked all emails and it's an empty folder once again. And so my thoughts, then it's just nice to see like providing such different data points like, oh, this is occupying my space. Can I do something about it? If not, let it go. And if yes, why is it bothering me? Or is it inspiring me? Can I do something about it? Like there are days where I'm just filled with ideas and I have to like get up and like jot them down. And then there are days I'm just too restless or thinking about death and grief. And I'm like, yeah, something's on my mind. And then it's just nice because I realize I'm very much dependent on him for my routines. If he doesn't do it, I'm definitely not doing it. Which often comes in my sleep routines. I love to be an early sleeper, but if he's awake...
I love sleeping late.
That's the one place where it sounds like there's any small difference. You guys are so compatible.
No.
We have so many opposites. He's a dark chocolate. I'm a white chocolate person. But thankfully, we don't have to share chocolates. He loves songs, podcasts. He needs to listen to that in the mornings. I'm a quiet person. And I have to tell him, like, can we not have any music by 9 a.m. in the morning? Like, just please no. And then he's like, I don't like mornings. That's one joy I look forward to. And I'm like,
Were there any cultural differences that stood out that you've had to navigate?
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So many.
Yeah.
Any advice for
Like-
those of us in cross-cultural marriage?
I mean, it's interesting because we're like I've come to India like almost every year since I was small, and so I'm like I'm more Indian than like most Indian Americans, but like
I'm probably more Indian than most.
yeah, exactly, and it's like yeah,
I mean, I say that like I'm gonna get canceled.
no, I agree. Knowing you, yes,
Absolutely.
but yeah, there's definitely cultural differences.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, I think now that I'm staying with his family in the States, I do notice a difference. Like when I was a college student and I'm also a newly married daughter-in-law, there would be times I would prioritize family over hanging out with friends. And I saw this as a huge difference in making friendships because making friends as a married person is very different than making friends as a single person. You immediately notice a difference. People view you as someone as not relatable because you're committed. Like you don't know what is casual dates, stand-up, like one-night stands and all. And I would notice a difference with him because since I was living with his family, he was more comfortable to communicate with his parents, like, sorry, we're going to go out and hang out with one of our friends. And like, I can tell them like, actually, I won't be able to make dinner tonight because I want to hang out with a friend at a bar. And that's one difference I noticed, that I would prioritize his parents or like family more, and he had more freedom in making decisions for both of us then.
Yeah, I think like it's some of it's like a cultural thing, and then like gender norms also culturally embedded. Where like I remember the first time that I was off for like an MBA interview, and like Kashish called me at like 10 and just was like, hey, like I'm still out, like I'm probably gonna stay out longer and like at this Halloween party, like is that okay? And I was like, Kashish, like
Is that
you
okay?
don't have to ask me. Like
I had curfew in
Just
India.
let me know.
yeah, I was like, we're sharing location, like just keep me posted. Like you don't need my permission to go. Like I'm literally in a different city right now doing an interview and like walking around and eating pizza. Like I don't, you have fun. Like don't be alone in the apartment doing nothing. Like go be with your friends and do what you need to do. But I like in talking about the context in which we grew up, like she always had a curfew. She always had parents that were watching. She always had an expectation that family was like supposed to be prioritized over everything else. And then even then it was like, when we were separate, it's like her family was worried, like, oh, how are you going to be staying alone? Versus like, I've lived in, like, I was an only child. I had parents that like generally gave me a lot of independence, that generally like the moment I could start driving in high school, I was off visiting friends and like playing around with how much I could go past the like 11 p.m., sometimes 12 a.m. curfew that they would give me. And then like,
Living on the edge.
yeah, I mean, it's like, I also knew my own boundaries. And so it's like, they trusted me and like, I had enough of that exposure and experience that it's like, yeah. And I lived by myself for many years. It's like, I think we just had very different, which leads to like different comfort levels and different like expectations that we put on ourselves.
True.
That I think we're still exploring. Because like I'm much more comfortable advocating and saying certain things or saying that I don't want to do this versus like Kashish.
I will try to like think more first about like what would family think about it and then me. And I find joy in doing that because that's my way of expressing love for the family. And for him to express love is more about like, if you love me and like have trust in me, like can it be unconditional then? And I think we're rubbing off on each other because I'm starting to become more open and vocal. And he's starting to think about like, how can I push Kashish to like be more on the edge, but also just like speak up more for myself as well.
Yeah, I think it's easy when, coming from a Western background to assume that, the way that we operate is superior. Like, oh, women are oppressed and they shouldn't function this way. But when entering that culture and peeking behind the curtain, it's like, well, there's so much. The intention is really love and consideration and care. And when it's done from that authentic place and not out of obligation or fear, there's so much beauty in that.
Such a mindset shift. It can easily be seen as something different, but there's like so much clarity within me. Like, I'm not doing this because I'm sacrificing. I'm doing this because it brings me joy. It brings me just like pure satisfaction. Like, I'm doing it for someone I love. It's like your mom staying awake with you at midnight just because you're sick and coughing. She has a complete choice to just go to sleep and not care about it, but it's just not in her nature to, right? Or like my dad just like making sure to check on me every single night when I was in Delhi studying alone for 3 years. Like, did you reach home safe? Did you have fruits? Did you have curd today? It's this way of taking care of me in that sense. So,
yeah, I think in the West, we have this contempt for what we perceive as oppression.
yeah.
And we have a complete misunderstanding of the foundation that it comes from of care. And so I'm definitely learning that,
Yeah.
being married to someone from India and trying to integrate it. It's really interesting to not know what you don't know and then to encounter it and not understand what you're encountering and then try to have context and syntax for it and then slowly transform yourself, like take it on superficially at first and then integrate it more. And then your friends, I don't know what your experience is. You know, we've been married like 8 years, a little bit longer than you guys, but some of my friends are like, why are you like this? Like, how can you do this? I'm like, it's so natural to me now, or I've just surrendered to certain ways that we function.
Yeah.
That it's interesting. It's interesting to get that lens of judgment or misunderstanding, which I had, you know, not that long ago. So you had a friend or two visiting Kana for the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had my friend also visit last time I was here in June, July. Yeah.
I had a friend from my MBA program come and visit as well.
So it's for you, it's kind of the water you swim in. What was it like seeing their perspective, being here for the first time?
So my friend, she came and visited me for 3 days. She's a friend I made in Delhi, and currently she's living in Hyderabad. A lovely friend of mine, and someone I sometimes really have like I have a tough time making friends because I just want to be friends with everyone, but then later it turns out like we don't have the same thoughts. I don't resonate well. Sometimes I don't reach out as often as I should, and just like friendships fall away, and especially moving around has been difficult. So we were friends only for 4 months before I dropped out of that school. So it was tough to keep in touch, but somehow we've managed once in a while text each other, just check in on each other. And I told her like, hey, I'm in Hyderabad in this meditation center. If you want to come and visit and stay over, we have like plenty of space, your food and everything. Like, just come and like, I would love to hang out with you. And she's someone who's totally down to do that. And I remember after 3 days stay, when she was about to leave, I was like, well, how was your experience? And that line will stick with me for like a very long time. It was beautiful. She said, I think like as long as I've known you, you've been a little cautious about sharing this part of your life, about your meditation life and the community that you have here. And in the past 3 days that I've stayed with you, it really feels you open your personal life, and you invited me in your personal life and made me feel as if a part of it. And it feels very sacred of you to do that. And I don't know how to thank you for it. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, it's very sacred, very personal, and thank you for realizing that part of my life. So
It's beautiful.
I think it was a good experience.
And your friend came for how long?
Yeah, my friend was here, I think similar, for like 3 days.
Wow. He came to India and left, or he was?
No, he was in India. There's a larger like MBA trek.
Okay.
That was student-led, and it was like 30 people traveling for 10 days across India. Taj Mahal, Varanasi, like all this stuff.
I'll
And
check the boxes.
yeah. And it was his first time in India, but he's traveled the world. And he had asked me, we had meditated like once or twice before on campus, and he had asked me like, hey, do you have any recommendations on like a place that's like meditation or yoga related that I could go to for these 3 extra days?
Do I?
So I FaceTimed him and I was like, do I have a place for you? Like, I will be here during these dates, like, and everything will be covered. Just show up. And I remember when we went to go like pick him up from the airport, like the feeling that was so palpable to me as we like entered into the ashram was like, wow, I forget sometimes because I come here so often, at least like once a year in the last 4 or 5 years, that like I forget how amazing this place can be. And like I was lucky enough, like I got here a week prior, right, before I picked him up. And so I had this massive transformation where like my first semester of MBA just finished and I felt so off center and like so in a different state of mind. And I come in and I feel that, and I feel like so palpably like there is no way I can come out of this. Like I have created my own trap and put myself in it and I'm caught. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. 4 days later, I'm like starting to feel like light come out of nowhere, and I'm like feeling hope, and I'm like, what is happening? Like this, and I'm like, there's no way. And I'm like,
this guy goes to yoga. He never likes yoga. He's starting to go to yoga now. So
I just decided like I need to move my body and feel connected.
Doing asanas, yeah.
And so then like my friend catches me, like I'm picking him up from the airport. He asked me how I'm doing, and I'm like, if you had asked me this yesterday, terrible. Today, amazing. Like in the last 12 hours, I have given like 4 or 5 meditation sessions. I have felt the best I've ever felt in the last 4 or 5 months. And like, I was just so filled with joy at like sharing with him, because I forget how special this place is. And I'm like, I am so glad you've come here. Like you don't realize, like just sitting here makes you feel better. And I don't know how or why, but like, it just brings something out of you and like helps you, and like, come, I'm so glad you came. And like, I think I felt very nervous because I typically only like bringing people here who have meditated like at least for a month, you know, occasionally or something. And like, you know, I feel like if you've experienced heartfulness, then you feel it better when you come here. And I was trepidatious that he had only like meditated with heartfulness twice. And he's done other stuff. And like, I think he was very open to it. And he like read the Heartfulness Way book, like audiobook. I gave it to him a week prior. So he had finished almost all of it, and he had notes ready. And I was like, okay, like
he's definitely a friend of yours. Notes ready. Did he have an Excel spreadsheet on his Google Docs?
He's also just a very open person.
He was very, and like, I think it worked out. Like, I think he hadn't told me, he's like, I don't know if you knew this, but like, I'm actually very interested in afforestation like regenerative agriculture and how to make that happen. And so he's like, when I read about this place, like, it seemed like you had suggested a place that you already knew was in line with what I was interested in. Incidentally. And so we had a wonderful time. And yeah, like I think it just like, I could feel a shift in myself during that time. And I think he could also feel just a general shift of like, the one thing he pointed out, and I think it was a general India thing, was like, he's like, people are so hospitable. Like there's so much hospitality, and like where there's no need for, it's almost like this, there's no boundary where there reasonably could be, right? And like one example was like we were trying to find the yoga room because I was taking him to yoga class and I forgot where it was. And we asked the security guard, and the security guard was like, yeah, you just go upstairs and it's to the left and you'll turn to right. And like he walked us up till the stairs. We took up the stairs. Apparently the security guard took the elevator, met us at the top of the stairs just to make sure that we found exactly where the room was. And he turned to me and he's like, only in India. Like this is such an Indian thing of like, people will go out of their way to make sure that you're taken care of because they know the answer, and why not give it to you and make sure that you like are taken care of.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit about your experience here. So I want to go a bit into some of your experiences in this practice. Now, you know, I guess this is where we kind of enter a caveat because we don't want to make this about like, oh, I had this amazing experience. And it's like, sometimes when we talk about our experiences, people feel like, oh, I haven't had that yet. And there's something wrong there's some deficit, right? So it's sharing under the intention of like possibility and knowing that we're all on different paths, having different experiences, but also that this is so magical and cool. And there's ways that we can experience that and motivate us to keep going. So what, we recently released, Daji recently released Spiritual Anatomy. And so he talks a lot about the points, the chakras, and how they correlate specifically with different conditions and different experiences. Yeah. Do you feel like you can, I was reading it and I was like, oh, that happened then. That happened then. Not everything was one-to-one, but it was really nice to read it retroactively. Is there any place in the book that resonated with you in terms of your journey through the...
Yeah.
I'm on page 80 currently of the book. And so one thing definitely that stood out for me from the book was, I believe it mentioned about 3 types of attitude you need towards practice. And that was liveliness, humility, and urgency. And what really stood out to me, the word was liveliness. If I were to sum up my last year, 2023, I believe it was a journey to be lively again, because I think I got really lost into this idea of like, I'm married and like it's all about family now. It's all about like giving up what you love and all. And I was talking to like people like you and like other friends I had, and it's like, no, like you can be joyful too, like, or something like you don't have to attach yourself to other people. Like, yes, you can serve them and be happy with them or like share joy with them, but you also need to find like joy within yourself, or like you need to value yourself equally. And it did not happen necessarily because of marriage. It was maybe like conversations or like some incidents that triggered off that, I don't know, emotion. And once you get triggered off, everything you see and start seeing in that lens, right? And when I read that word liveliness and like approaching your practice or even approaching life with liveliness, and basically for me, like enthusiasm and passion. I was just talking to my father-in-law the other day, and I was asking him like, if there's one skill or like one thing you definitely want your children to have, what would it be? And he's like, passion or enthusiasm for life. You can like be all saint-like, give up on life and, you know, transcend everything. But then what's the joy that you've taken this birth for? Like, what's pushing you to live forward for another day? What are you living for? Like, it's easy to die for, right? But what is something that's keeping you alive? And it's like tuning in more and more to that joy, to that liveliness. Like, how can I bring life into everything I do? And how can I, like, anytime I see this guy depressed or like slipping into that phase of like, I'm sad, I'm like, yo, get up. Like, we need to go out, like, be lively again. Like, I believe my inner nature is happiness. And anytime I feel sad, it's literally the silliest of things, or maybe some big feelings I haven't learned to process yet, or I just need to sit it down, cry it out, or just find someone to blame or who can take that emotion. Like, just, it's not that person's fault, but just like, let me speak to that about it. And once that's gone and disappeared, 2 minutes later, I find myself fake laughing and then actually laughing and just like, that was just, that wasn't so bad now. And it's just starting to get better day by day then. So I really like that concept of liveliness towards anything.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah. Mine is very different, I would say like, I have a moment, this is like several years ago, but like I would, in general, especially when talking about spiritual anatomy, like I like went to Georgia Tech, and like that's also the time that I became an instructor. So I think it was very innate to the way I think and the way that I teach as well, is like being pretty methodical about like the way that we collect the data from like how we're feeling. Because having grown up around heartfulness, it's like you mentioned in the caveat earlier, it's like you grow up hearing so many different stories of like, so-and-so came to me in the form of this and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, and so when I first meditated ever, it was like on a marble floor in front of, Chariji, and there's 100 people behind me, and like, it was an hour and 20 minutes. And typically it shouldn't be more than an hour. I don't know. And then like, I remember all I could think about was like chocolate and my to-do list. And I felt so like deflated afterwards, because I was like, I felt nothing. Like, I thought I was supposed to feel something and go into the Zen zone and like achieve something. And anyways, I think what led me, like what I realized later on in my journey was that like, it's a lot like you have to put in the work and start collecting the data, and you start noticing things over time. And the more you observe, the more you're able to appreciate, because things are often happening at a very subtle level. And like our lives are not typically even attuned to what's happening inside. And so, yeah, it was really like, I've spent probably a year or two just like working with my instructor of like, he would just ask me after every session of like, do you feel any vibrational difference, like left versus right? And at first I would be like, sure, like maybe my left side feels vibrationally lighter, but I don't know what that means. And like, maybe it's just because I worked out or like I'm, feeling anxious or whatever. He's like, it's okay, just write it down. And it got to a point where it's like, I do enough of the like top versus bottom, left versus right, that like I could actually feel almost unequivocally that like, no, like in the middle of the session, there was a vibration here and then it just stopped. And then there was a vibration here. And then I could write it down and then he would write it down and then we would compare and I'd be like, whoa, like halfway you also felt the vibration shift? Like, okay, there's something here that's maybe not just my body. It's like something in the world of thoughts and the mental sphere and the spiritual space. And so then I think the one moment that I had was like, I was in my third year, and I was doing internship interviews and I had somehow stumbled upon like consulting interviews, and like I wasn't planning on doing an internship, but somehow I threw my resume and I got asked to do like a final round interview. So I was 2 interviews in and I'm like freaking out. Like I've never done a case interview. I never thought to do consulting. All of my friends had like spent months preparing for these interviews. And I felt very much like very under the water and like overwhelmed. But I knew at that point, I was like, I just need to keep meditating. I just need to like, it calms me down or it does something. And I remember the morning of the interview, I'm like, okay, I've done whatever I can. And I like, let me just sit to meditate. And I could feel I was very aware of the anxiety that I was facing. And when I sat to meditate, I could feel just like an overwhelming amount of vibration, like in the top right. And it was so clear, like there was without a doubt. And I was like, this is the vibration that I'm feeling is like, I'm very anxious about this, of like messing up this interview. And I'm feeling a ton of vibration in the top right. And then I was like, I'm pretty sure this is related. And like after the interview happened, I like checked the book and it was like, yep, fear and courage. 4th point, top right. And I was like, okay, I think there's something here. Like, I think they're related. And that was really like encouraging, I would say. It's like, you don't need to like read something in order for it to work out. You could feel it, collect the data yourself. And then when you feel ready for it, like go back and actually triangulate and be like, okay, like this is something.
It can work both ways. Like you read about it and you geek out about it and then you kind of don't really understand or you forget, but then you experience it in the field in your system. Yeah. And then that's what I love about spiritual anatomy. It's, we've read Babaji's writings over time, but it's a little bit meatier, I guess I would say. Yeah. And so reading it again in a more modern, accessible way, it's just like, oh yeah. Yeah. And having more experience under your belt, it's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Like I've swum in that water a little bit, or I've dipped my toe in that water, or I've seen it from afar. So it's really quite an adventure.
That is true.
Well, I know you guys have some things to check off your bullet journal. So you're going to go do your New Year's intention.
Annual Partner Summit.
Yeah, partners.
APS.
But it's been really lovely talking and laughing with you and getting to know you a little bit more every time we connect.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
All right. Enjoy your next cycle of the sun.
Stay tuned for the next one.
In 20 years.
20 years.
20 years. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of KANHACAST. Please follow and subscribe to KANHACAST on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. Until next time, woof woof.